All right. Welcome everybody to this week's webinar. My name is Timo Ylikoski and I'm a customer support consultant here at AgileTech. And this week we're going to be talking about dynamic scripts and script conditions. So to start off, I have a few slides. We'll go through that just to discuss or cover the basics of conditions, what they are, how you can use them and why you could use them, and then we have a couple of examples that we can go through that will then hopefully help you understand first of all what these conditions are, and also to give you an idea of how you could leverage conditions in your own solutions, in your own scripts. So this is not intended to be a very thorough technical training into condition usage, but rather just going through some examples and talking about how conditions work, and hopefully give you some ideas how you could use conditions. Because that's also always one thing. I would say creating and adding conditions to your scripts is not that difficult. That it's more challenging to first of all to figure out use cases for conditions, because it's not always obvious where when and where you could use conditions to help make your scripts more dynamic. But hopefully after this session you'll have a better understanding of what conditions are, and maybe this will also give you some ideas how these could be used to help you in your work, help you improve your own scripts. So what are conditions? To put it simply, that the conditions are rules that are either true or false, and they show up like this in your script. So in a way they look similar to loops, in a way that they are these kind of brackets in your script, and then each condition has a specific rule, and if that rule is met, then the condition is executed, which means that whatever part is inside the condition block is then executed. If the condition is not met, then the segment will be skipped. So here are a couple of simple conditions as an example. You can have a condition that your script looks for a value in an Excel column, and then if the value in Excel column equals whatever something, then the condition is true, and then whatever is inside the condition block will be executed in the script. If the condition is not met, then that part will be skipped. Another example could be a condition that looks at the value of an SAP field. So when you are running your script, you have a condition that looks at whatever value is currently stored in a field in SAP. Then based on that, whether that value is something, then the condition will be true or false, and then the condition segment will be executed. Otherwise, it will be skipped. In this example, and we'll get to this in a bit, but here we actually have two different blocks. Here's an if block. So when the condition is met, this first segment or condition block is executed. If it's not, then we'll go to the else branch and then do whatever is in here. So conditions can be applied to like so. It can cover multiple screens, like we see here. It can cover a single screen or a single field. It really depends on the process, what the actual need is. And this is also something that you can experiment with, because for a lot of cases there are multiple different ways you can configure the condition and still get the same results. But we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The main usages for conditions are, or the main two use cases are, first of all, you can use conditions to add additional logic to your script. Quite often your business has these kinds of business rules. For instance, here we have a couple of examples, like if you are using account number 100,000, then you might have a specific tax code that is always used with that account, or maybe with certain company codes or or plants or sales organizations, there might be rules that when you use this value for a company code, you must use this value for sales organization or something like that. Traditionally, without conditions, when you create a script, you would just simply put all these fields into your Excel data file. But with rules and conditions, you can sort of have your script automatically update the values in SAP based on these rules. So of course, then that there's less room for error. So you don't have to have the end user, the runner user, fill in all these values if there is specific logic behind all of it. So instead of having the user enter plant number and sales organization, you could have a rule that the user only inputs plant number, and then the script logic handles the rest of it and automatically updates the sales organization based on whatever value was entered in the plant field in Excel. So you can build this kind of logic to your script with these conditions. The other good use for conditions is to handle exceptions. There might be cases where you sometimes get pop-ups in your script depending on the data that you are using when you are running the script. There might be that with some data you get additional pop-ups. With other data you don't get those pop-ups, and it's difficult to create, or actually impossible to create, a script that would work for both cases without using conditions. So you can add conditions to handle cases when you get these pop-ups, and then make which will then enable you to, or make your script more dynamic and make your script be able to handle different kinds of situations, different exceptions. So pop-ups, different kinds of SAP dialog variations, things like that. And we have a example related to that as well. So hopefully it will then come a little bit clearer what these all mean. Here's a screenshot of the condition dialog. So when you start adding a condition, you specify the section, what rows of your script will be inside the condition, and then you have these logical operators that you can use to configure the condition or the rule. So we have operators like you see here, looking at a specific column in Excel, and if the value is equal to or greater than or less than or between in a certain value range, or you could even configure a list of acceptable values. And there's a long list of operators here that you can use to build these conditions, and you can actually combine multiple conditions, which will then allow you to build even more complex rule sets, more complex conditions. Then you could even have nested conditions that will then allow you to do very, very complex things with your script. But if you're just starting with conditions, I would start with something relatively simple. Maybe have a condition for a single field or a single screen that looks at an Excel value and then performs or updates a value in SAP based on your Excel data, for instance. So without further ado, let's look at some practical examples, because that's always the best way to actually see and see how this works and learn how to get an idea how these work. So we have 3 different examples here. First, we have a cost center creation where we sort of encounter something strange when we start running the script, and then which we can then solve by using a condition. Then I have an example related to material master data and this kind of predefined values or template thinking that you can do with your conditions. And then third example is related to SAP dialog variations, and how you can add conditions to enable your script to handle different kinds of situations. And the idea is not to focus on these exact T codes. It doesn't really matter. I just picked these as relatively straightforward examples, so we are not focusing on cost center or material master data, but just the focus is on the conditions. So the same principles would apply to any process or any T code you are working on or working with. I have some pre-made recordings for most of this, so we don't need to spend too much time looking at how to record things. So hopefully at this point you are already fairly familiar with how a basic recording works with Winshuttle. And if you have been with us if you joined the past handful of webinars, you should already be quite familiar with most basic recording aspects of Winshuttle. So we can just focus on the conditions themselves. So here I have a KS01 script, a very simple script to create cost centers in SAP. Just a few screens here and a handful of fields. But we can start with running the script. So let's just go ahead and run it to begin with, so we can see how this is currently working. So I'm trying to create these 4 cost centers in SAP with this kind of basic data here, and we don't really even care about the data here. We're just focusing on the conditions. So let's see what happens when I run this. Okay, so we get a success message for the first record here saying the cost center was created. But then for the subsequent cost centers, we get a no batch input data error for all 3 of these. And actually, if you look at the data is identical between all 3 of these. So now the first thing you probably would want to do in a situation like this. So the fact that the first transaction was successfully completed is an indication that something must be working. So now we just have to figure out why the subsequent records failed. So let's try running this. Maybe we want to run this in debug mode. I think that's usually your best bet when you want to start troubleshooting scripts. You need to get to the bottom of what's wrong with your script. And we can actually, let's just delete the first one here, because that was successfully updated. We don't really care about that. So let's run this in debug mode. See if we can find out what is causing the subsequent records to fail. All right, there we go. There's our debug run now. So the first thing we get here is this dialog box where SAP asks for the controlling area 1000. Then we acknowledge that. Then we fill in the cost center name, validity, dates, and then it's just actually one screen. That's some basic data for the cost center. We press enter and save. So that was the first record successfully uploaded. But now we go to the second record, second cost center in our list, and actually this is where it fails. The queue will be the little dialog or control box disappearing. That tells us that now this is where execution fails. And if you were paying close attention, you noticed that the first time I was doing this, it asked for the controlling area, but now for the second cost center, it automatically goes to this main screen, and it skipped the controlling area dialog box. So SAP actually remembers the setting we used for that after we ran the first transaction, but Winshuttle doesn't really know that, so that's Winshuttle is still expecting that the dialog box for the little pop-up for the controlling area is going to be there. That's what the script is expecting, and it's not there, so the script will fail. And we don't need to run the third one because that's the same thing. So now the difference here is that the first time we run it for the first record, the controlling area dialog box is there, but for the subsequent records, it's missing. This is something that can happen in a handful of SAP transactions. So there are cases where when you first run it, SAP asks for some information, maybe controlling area or company code or sales organization, sales data, something like that. But then for the subsequent records, the second, third, and so on rows in Excel, SAP remembers some of those settings and then maybe skips something in the dialog, and that's where you're going to be running into issues with your script. But hopefully or luckily, I should say, we can use a condition to solve this problem. So when working with conditions, you sort of have to get quite familiar with the expert view of your script. In Winshuttle Studio, you have to learn to interpret, to read the expert view a little bit, at least to be able to identify screens and fields in your script. Otherwise, it will be difficult to be able to use conditions. But in this case, it's pretty simple because it's the first thing in our recording. And actually, if you look at the first screen in my recording, the description actually says dialog box to get values, something. And this is where we have the value 1000 for the controlling area. So what I can do is I can select this whole screen here and then click on create condition. And with these conditions, you can also further adjust the selected rows here. So if I increase the row numbers here, you can see the selection changes in the background. So you can make sure that you have the correct rows selected, whatever rows you want your condition to cover. And in this case, it's pretty simple because what we want to use is the first transaction condition, which doesn't have any other additional parameters. It's just if first transaction. And let's click OK and see what this ends up looking like. So it adds this kind of purple bracket around the selected area. In this case, this one single screen. It's now inside a condition that says, actually you see it here, if first transaction, then we do this. So this would mean that when we are running the script, if this is the first record in our data set, the first row in Excel, then we will perform whatever is inside this section. But for the second row, third row, and so on, all the subsequent records, this section will be actually skipped, and the execution will basically start here from this screen from here, and we'll start doing this. So now my script should be able to handle all cases, whether this dialog box is there or whether it's not there. So then we would come back here, and again, I think that was successfully already created. So let's try running this for a couple of rows. Maybe 2 rows is enough so we can see that it works for both rows, and hopefully it will. So let's just run this again and see if we now get a success message for both of these records, for both cost centers. The first one was successfully created, and there we go. The second one was also successfully created. So now our condition here works, and we can use this to create any number, any amount of cost centers that we wanted. Also, this is also why you when you are testing something, you usually want to have a couple of rows of data just to make sure that it actually works for multiple records. So this is something that you would not notice if you were only testing this with one row of data, because it always works for the first record, even if we don't have the condition. So that's why you usually want to have a couple of rows of data when you are testing any kind of script. So that would be a pretty simple if first transaction condition. There's also an opposite condition called not first transaction, where it actually works the other way around. I can't think of an actual example where this would be useful, because the first transaction is something that you might run into. Maybe there are cases where it works the other way around, that first time it doesn't ask for something, but then for all the subsequent records, SAP will ask for some additional information or whatever it is related to, and then you would want to use this not first transaction condition instead. So that's a pretty simple first example. Let's move on to something slightly more complicated and have a look at the second example I have prepared for today, which is related to material master data. And for that, actually, this is again a sort of a made up example, but this kind of logic probably applies to a lot of cases in your business processes. So the example I chose for this is related to material groups. So in this example, what we want to do is we want to have a script that updates the material group field under the sales organization one screen in MM02. Then based on what value we input here, we want our script to automatically update these fields. We'll not do all of these. We'll pick a handful of these fields. So there's my material pricing group, there's some other material groups, and a couple of checkboxes. So depending on what value the user enters here, we'll update these with script conditions, with rules. So the idea here is that there are cases where like I mentioned when we started, there are the cases where you have these kinds of business rules that, for instance, maybe when you use material group 002, you always want to use material pricing group 1 and account assignment group 2. So why would you then put this into Excel, into the data template? Because the more fields you have in Excel, the bigger the chance that somebody inputs incorrect information there is. So if there are clear business rules for these kinds of things, then we can sort of create templates with these kinds of with the script conditions. So let's see what this looks like. So let's open up a script. We'll actually close that one. We don't need that first example anymore. I have a script recorded for this where I have mapped a couple of the basic fields. So it's sort of a halfway complete solution. It's not fully finalized, but just to save some time again, I already recorded MM02, where we actually are just, if we look at the expert view here in this script, we are going into MM02, going into the basic data view, and there going into here's the sales data. We are going to sales organization one screen first, where we update the material group, and I have mapped these fields to Excel. So my Excel contains the basic data, what the basic things we need, like the material number, and then the plant and sales data, and then the material group. So the idea here is that user will input the material group into Excel, and then with script conditions, we will update these fields depending on what value the user filled in the material group field, or in this F column in Excel. So the traditional way would be, of course, to just start mapping these fields, map material pricing group to column G, account assignment to column H, and so on. And that's fine. Maybe that works for you, but here we want to explore this kind of template thinking. So instead of having the user fill in these fields manually in Excel, if there are clear business rules for these based on the material group, then we can create rules and have the script update the fields automatically with the correct values. Now let's say we want to, maybe there's 3 different cases. Let's say we have 3 cases, which would be, we have a case where material group is 001, another case where we have material group 002, and a third one 003. Let's try to keep that simple. So we have 3 cases, but in our recording, in our script, we only have one recorded screen here, which is of course normal because that's the way you record it. You record the process, and that's fine. But the first thing we want to do is we want to replicate these 3 different scenarios. And what you can do here in the expert view is you can actually, if I select a row here, I'll click on this row to start here and then hold down Shift and click at the last row of the screen. I can select all the rows related to that SAP screen. Then if you right click, you can actually select copy to copy those selected rows. Then I'll click on the last row here and again right click and select paste after. This actually copies the selected screen and pastes it below that one. Now we have the same screen, the exact same fields twice here, but we want to have 3 different cases. So let's paste it another time to ensure that we have all 3 different cases in the script. Now all that is left to do is add the conditions and then change the values to whatever would be the correct values. So let's select the first case, the first version or copy of or in this case it would be the original recorded screen. Select all those rows and click on create condition. In this case, we want to create a column-based condition. So we'll be looking at a column in Excel. My material group is in column F. So we want to select that here. So let's select column F, click on go here. That's column F selected. Then we select one of the logical operators here. So here is the full list of the different operators you have available here. For this example, we are happy with the default equal to value. And here I want to put in the first case, material group 001. There's our first case. If the value in Excel column F equals 001, then we do whatever is here. Then the script would update these fields with these values. So let's maybe change these values to something else. Let's say the pricing group should be 001, and maybe we don't check all these check marks, so I'll remove a couple of those so we have something like this. I'm just making this up. Here's you would normally put in values that actually would be the real correct values for your case. Then we have to now do this for the second and the third scenario as well. So let's look at the second version, a copy of this screen here. Basically do the same. Highlight it, click create condition, select the same Excel column because we are just looking at the Excel column F for all these conditions. So the only difference will be that for this case we are performing doing this if the material group is equal to 002, and then we would adjust the values. Maybe we use material pricing group 2 and account assignment group 2, and this would be 102, and maybe we use a different set of checkboxes, different values for this scenario. And then we finally do it 1/3 time for the last third scenario. Again, we're looking at the same Excel column F, but this time we are looking at if the material group value in column F is equal to 003, then we do this. Let's maybe switch these around. This is one, and it's just so that we have a few different variations of these values, whatever. Now, and this is also something that you wanna do when you are working with conditions. You wanna sort of, and you have to kind of think about how the script will be executed. So it is a little bit of also a logic exercise for you. So you have to think, what happens if I now run the script and I have material group 001? Okay, the script will start from the beginning, do whatever we have here. Then it gets to this point. It looks at the condition. If column F is 001, okay, it is. So this is true. The condition triggers. We go inside here. The script will update these fields with these values here. They are all fixed values in my script, so they are not in Excel at all. Then the script execution continues. It goes here, looks at the second condition. If column F is 002, it's not, it was 001, so it skips this section entirely. Then it looks at the third condition. If column F equals 003, it's still not true, it's 001 in this case. Then we jump over here and do whatever is left, which is to save it. So then you would repeat this. Okay, what happens if I have material group 002? Then what happens if I have 003? But in this case, you would also need to consider other options. What if somebody puts in 004? What will happen? Okay, so then all of these conditions would be skipped and nothing would happen. What if somebody leaves the value blank? So you have to kind of think about all the possible cases to test your condition logic. So let's save this, and we can try running it then. The idea is that we would run it for some materials using different material group values, and then the runner user don't need to put in anything, fill in anything else in Excel other than first of all the material number and sales organization data, but then only the material group, and our script logic will handle the rest of the data updates. The rules conditions will automatically update all the other fields we had on that one screen based on the value here. So there are a lot of cases where this kind of logic can be applied. So in this case, we duplicated the entire screen 3 times, and now it actually, you can see it worked for all different cases. And now, of course, normally you would go into SAP and verify that all the values were indeed, for all these 3 materials, that all the values were actually changed correctly to whatever values we used here inside our conditions. But this way you can have your script fill in values for you based on this kind of rule logic. So this was an example from MM02, but there are a lot of cases where you could use something like this. If it's finance related, certain accounts will require maybe certain tax codes. With materials, there might be other things maybe related to the type of material you are creating. Then you maybe use certain predefined values. Could be something in HR. If you are hiring for a certain position, you always do something, use a specific value for some other field. So in those cases, you could instead of having everything in Excel, you could have you could use conditions and have the script and Winshuttle automatically manage updating the fields for the user, just so the user don't really need to then fill in that many fields in Excel. But of course, this is now a kind of a design decision, and and then of course you lose a little bit of flexibility in a way. So let's imagine now that this script would be perfect for a while, and maybe at some point there's a new material group 004 that we want to be enable in our script. Now we don't have a case for that script in our, for that kind of a condition, that scenario in our script. So then the developer would have to come back and again reproduce this screen, copy this one more time and create a new condition for it, and then save the script, republish it, distribute it to the users, and so on. So you have, it's a design decision that you as a developer will need to make, whether you want to use these or not. For something that is very static, that doesn't really ever change, then this kind of condition would be good. So if you know that these values are sort of set in stones, and then I would use conditions for something like this. Another option would be that we could even have, instead of having the user manually update the material group, we could update the values on the second screen based on the existing value of an SAP field. So instead of having it in Excel column F, I could say that our script will be looking at what is the name of the field? It's MATKL, yeah. If the value for the material group in SAP is equal to 001, then we do this. So in this case, I wouldn't even need this in my Excel column. My script would be looking at the data for each specified material that I have in Excel, and then the conditions would look at the field, the value in the SAP field, whatever value is now currently in SAP for this field. If it is 001, then we do upload these values. So that's another way. So instead of looking at values in Excel, you can have your condition look at existing values in SAP and then do whatever is needed based on the value. So there are a lot of different things you can do with conditions, and I think that at least first of all, if you're just getting started using conditions, I think the first challenge is to find good applications for this, because it's not always immediately obvious that this is something where I could use a condition. But hopefully after this webinar, you'll maybe have some ideas of where you could leverage this kind of logic in your script, and then you can start looking at how to actually set up the condition for your specific case. I have one more example here. Let's actually open up that script. I will go ahead and close this one. It's an FB01 script here, so it's a financial document. I think it was a customer credit memo or something. Again, that's not really important. We have a script here. Let's have just a quick look at the expert view. It's not super complex. It does have a loop. So basically, there's some set of header level data for a financial document, and then there's a loop to add item or items to your document using a loop here. So account numbers, amounts, and so on. Well, let's just go ahead first and start by running the script. I have data here for 2 different postings, so not a lot, but will be enough to illustrate a sort of a problem that we will experience here when we try to run this. So let's just run it and see what happens. So this will be also an example of troubleshooting as well, I guess, because this is, we'll see how you would normally go about solving these kinds of scripting issues. So let's wait for the run to complete here, and then have a look at the log message and see what happens. Hopefully I have all the other data correct here. Okay, so the first one was successfully posted to SAP. But for the second one, we have no batch input data for a screen, and then it shows the screen number and something. You can see the screen name in this case, it's line item taxes. So it's, you can probably guess that it's related to line items and something tax related. But other than that, it's really difficult to start guessing unless you have already worked with a similar script in the past, and you might know, okay, I know what this is. But normally at this point, your best bet is again to run this in the debug mode. But let's focus on this second posting, because the first one was successfully posted. So that means that something must have done something correct in our script. Otherwise, we would have gotten an error here as well. So we know that this was okay. So let's focus on this one. So I'll say we'll run from rows 6 through 10 here and run this in debug. So this, now you can also see what the script is doing, even if you are not familiar with the FB01. But you'll see how the loop here works, and then hopefully the debug will show us where the execution fails, and hopefully we can use that to figure out what the problem is. So normally, and this would apply, I think, to any kind of script troubleshooting. What you want to do is, especially if you get these kinds of no batch input data for whatever screen, it means that there was a screen encountered during the runtime that is that is somehow different from your recording. So you would want to run it in this debug mode and then compare this dialog here to whatever you have in your recording, the recorded dialog, and try to figure out where this live debug run is, how it is different from your original recording. Because that's usually, once you find the difference, then that's where the problem usually is. So here's the header level data, and then I can just click here to go to the next step. We fill in the first line item and go to the main screen. And this is where the loop will start. So we enter line item data here. We go to another screen that looks like this, where we enter the amount. We press enter on the keyboard, and then we go back to the main screen. So that was the first line item, and you see the line items are then added here. Then we repeat it for the second line item. Looks similar. We press enter, press back to go to the overview. Start again, third line item, same thing. Press enter, go back. Next line item. Now our little control box disappeared. That's your cue. That's where the problem is. Now this is a screen that is somehow different from what we have in our recording. If you were paying very close attention, you might notice that this is a little bit different. If you weren't, I can tell you the difference here is that for this specific account, we need additional data. There's a mandatory tax code field here that we must fill in. But we didn't even have this kind of screen in our recording. So let me show, I have a screenshot of both screens here in our PowerPoint. So the accounts that we have in our recording look like this, but the screen that we encountered look like this. So you see it's fairly similar with a few key differences. The tax code, determined tax field, maybe there's some of the other fields are also a little bit different. But especially the tax code is a problem because it's a mandatory field, a required field in SAP. So we don't have this screen in our recording, we only have this version. So our script is not able to handle this variation of the same screen, which is why our script is failing at this point. So let's just cancel it. We don't need to run it to the end. Well, that was the last row, I think, anyway, so that's it. That's it for the debug run. So now here's our script, the loop, and the first thing you want to do is you want to identify here where the line item section is. So in my loop, we have the overview screen here, and then it's actually two screens here inside our loop. So it starts from here and goes down to here. So this is the part where we manage the line item data on the line item specific screen. We are only uploading the amount, and then we are going back to the main overview screen. So what you could do in a case like this is you don't have to fully re-record this script. You could technically record a script and try to record both cases, record the normal account, and then record the account that needs tax information, and then you would have both in the same script. But since we already have a decent script, it works for all the other accounts, but just not for the one. What you can do is you can actually start another session of Winshuttle Studio. So we'll just leave this one script open here. That will be our main script. Then we'll do a new recording. It doesn't have to be a complete, fully functional recording. All we want to do is create a recording where we capture that one screen, the tax relevant line item screen. So I could go to create a new recording here, log on, and record a new FB01 script. Start recording. So I'm just doing this to record that one screen here. Other than that, I don't really care what this recording is going to be like. I'm not going to use this for anything. I just want to get that one screen captured correctly. Of course, I have to use actual valid data here once the recording starts to actually get to that screen. But I'm not worried about mistakes, or I don't have to worry about the loop here or anything else. I just have to put in some values here that allows me to get to that screen. So I'll just quickly fill in whatever is the bare minimum we read here. So we need to have the first item here, and let's do whatever. Now here is where we normally would, this is where our loop started earlier, but I'll just put in the, what was the line number? Was it one, I think it was 154,000. Yes, this is a tax relevant. So then I'll put in some amount here. Tax code is, can you use 1I? I believe we need to use that as well. Then press enter. Let's see that it's validated, and then we can go back to the display document overview screen. So now that was the part I wanted. That one screen, that was what I was interested in. I don't have to finish this. I can leave it as is. I can actually cancel this and not even save anything. This will be, in itself, this will be a pretty useless script, but it's fine as long as we capture the one screen that is missing from our original FB01 recording. And now we need to find that screen or that section in this new recording. So let's look at the values here. Here's the tax relevant. Actually, you see from the screen name and the description, line item taxes. So we'll be starting from there. And then the second one is where we go back to the overview. So that's the section that is missing from my original script. So just like before, we were copying the material group sections. We can do the same here. We'll copy it here, but instead of pasting it into this script, I can paste it into my original FB0 script. And now I just need to be careful where I place it here. I can say paste before. So there we go. This is the part we just copied from the other recording. So we created sort of a dummy recording where we captured the missing screens, and then we can copy paste from that script to our original script. So now we have both variations of that screen in our script. We have a line item for the screens for tax relevant accounts, and then another section for normal accounts that don't have that same requirement for tax codes. Now what I want to do is create a condition here. So this would be the tax relevant section. And this in this example, let's do this slightly differently. So we have those selected for our if section, but additionally, we will specify an else section. So let's assume for the sake of this example that the account number 154,000 is the only account that requires the tax code. So what we can then do is we can specify, let's see what our account number will be in column H. So we can say that column H is equal to 154,000. That will be my condition. But the else section is simply what sort of the other alternative. So we can change these rows here. So for the else clause, we want that to be the sort of second option. So let's just click OK. It'll be easier to see what it looks like after this. So now our condition is twofold. It has an if branch and an else branch. So when you look at the condition, if column H, the account number, if it equals 154,000, then we do the if block, which is this. If it doesn't equal this number, if it's anything else, if it's blank, if somebody types something incorrectly there, any other case, we go and do this. We go into the else branch of our condition. So for these kinds of binary cases where you have only two options, it's going to be that or it's not. Then you can use this kind of if-else logic. In the previous example, we had three different material groups. We had 0, 1, 2, and 3. So those cases we used three separate conditions. So, and also this is also a little bit of matter of preference. You could create two separate if conditions, one if condition for this section and another if condition for this one, and the end result would pretty much be the same. But just for the sake of the example, let's use this if-else condition here. And now the final thing here is to map the fields that I have inside, because if the other account is already mapped, but this one isn't, we have the amount. So let's say, where is my amount field here? Account number, amount would be column I, so let's map that to here. Let's say we want to put the tax code into column J because we have conveniently left out one column there, one blank column in our Excel, so I will map that to sales tax code like so. Let's say that checkbox to determine tax base, we'll leave that as a static value, so that will be selected. And I think that will be all we need. But before we run this again, we'll just need to, for the tax relevant accounts, so this one 154, we'll need to put in the tax code here into Excel because that will be uploaded to SAP. For the other fields, for the other accounts, we don't need that because those are not tax relevant accounts. So let's try running this, see how that works. Hopefully I didn't miss anything crucial here, which is quite easy when you start copy pasting things, and you need to pay some attention to make sure everything works correctly. But it looks good. We got an acknowledgement here from SAP saying that our document was posted successfully, and we can see we used a tax relevant account. So that way you can copy paste and combine multiple scripts together, and then have then add conditions to handle these different types of cases, and then then that way you can have your create scripts that are able to do multiple different things. In this case, we only have 2 different account types, but there could be a third account type that requires maybe a different set of data. We could create another sort of scenario, a condition for that here, copy paste something else here, and it doesn't even have to be something like this. You could have a script that updates a record in SAP and a separate script that deletes the record in SAP, and then you could combine them both together into one super script that can do both things, update the data or delete the whole record, depending on what the user entered into the Excel data file. But yeah, then that of course gets more complicated, and then at some point it will be a bit of a judgment call whether you want to have multiple different script versions for different cases, or whether you prefer to have one simple script with a very long script with lots of conditions that can handle multiple different things, and that will be up to you, what you prefer, and your runner users. One last thing I would say, maybe not this case, but the previous, the MM02 example, is that you probably want to be transparent about what your script is doing. If you think about it from the runner user point of view, let's open up the MM02 for a second here. So if this would be my template, and then the runner, as a runner user, all I would fill in was the material number, plant, and so on. Maybe the material group, well, we deleted it from here, but you probably want to be, like I said, transparent about what the script is doing. So maybe write up some instructions somewhere, maybe have another sheet in Excel that explains the whole template logic, that if you enter material number 001, this is what will happen, because otherwise the user will not see here what the script is actually doing in SAP, because everything is, all the data, all the values are uploaded using the conditions. So it might be confusing for the users, for the runner users, if they don't really know what the script is doing. So you have to also think about the runner users and try to make your scripts easy to understand, and be transparent about what the script is doing. So, but yeah, that's all for today. As usual, you can find more training material and all the recorded webinars on our training site, azutek.com/training. And of course, you're always welcome to contact us at support@azutek.com. Well, I think we finished just in time, so that's all for this week. Thanks for everybody for joining us today, and hopefully this has been a interesting and thought-provoking session for you. Maybe this gives you some ideas on how you can leverage conditions in your own scripts. So that's all. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice day.